Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Poe and Myers. I'm Ariadna.
And I'm Dylan.
And we're back here with another special guest, as we are basically every Friday lately. We're on a roll.
We are.
It's such a start of a great season. We have so many cool guests coming up. And who do we have today?
We have author Joshua Bates. Joshua, how are you?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I'm doing well today. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. So excited to have you on here and finally be able to talk to you. We have a million things. Well, you and Dylan have a million things in common.
A pleasure to be here.
Definitely. So before we start, of course, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So like you said, my name is Joshua Bates. I am a Midwest writer. I was born in Wisconsin. Currently right now I'm living in Illinois. My wife is going to school right now to be a psychologist. So we moved down to the Chicagoland area. We don't live exactly in the city, but we live in a western suburb. I graduated from school from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh 4 years ago. And I didn't start out as a writer. I actually started out, much like you guys, as an English teacher. I taught middle school. I taught high school for a couple of years. And I actually graduated school with a degree in creative writing as well. So I kind of always had my sights set to do something in the writing realm, but I kind of leaped into teaching first to get my feet wet before taking a step into the writing field. So yeah, that's kind of who I am. Pretty simple guy. My wife and I like to go for walks, and we're big movie fans. We love reading, obviously, and yeah, I love to cook. I guess that's my one thing that I do every day consistently. I'm a big fan to be in the kitchen.
Ooh, I like that.
That's so nice and so rare because both of us fight over who has to cook. Neither of us can cook. It's a problem. And then now it's just Grubhub is kind of becoming our best friend, and that's so awesome that you cook.
It's so funny because my wife and I have this debate often because she runs a full-time business while going to school full-time, which is why I was able to retire from teaching and pursue this dream. And so we fight all the time about who's the better chef, because she always claims without her I wouldn't be able to cook, and I always claim, without me we wouldn't eat. So it's kind of the chicken before the egg conversation in our household often. So it's a good problem to have, I guess. Though.
It is.
You have two people that can cook.
Yeah, ours is we're getting there. We've had our living situation. We live with a whole bunch of people right now with just family members, but still. So the kitchen is always busy and whatnot. So it's always very last minute. Plus, our schedules all over the place because I'm much like your wife. I work a whole lot. I'm not saying he doesn't by any means, but mine is.
And it stinks to come home and cook.
Exactly.
So
mine, I can be working, especially because I work with different time zones. I can be working at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And we're getting there. I think he's the one who wants to cook the most. You want to learn.
I do want to take I do take a couple of classes and just kind of learn.
Give me
basics.
my salads, and I'm fine with salad every day. But you do want to cook.
No, I do. I do want to learn.
So that's always good. Going back to teaching English, yes. We did email you back. I don't know if a lot of our KPM fam knows this, maybe, but we were and are, I guess, English teachers. Well, I was for 10 plus years, and Dylan's taking a small break currently, but it's on his list.
Little pandemic going on.
Just a little.
I love children. I love children, but they are germ machines. So once this kind of passes, jumping right back in because I do miss them dearly.
Yeah, I on the other hand don't. No, I do.
I understand that. No, I recently quit teaching, and so I've had a lot of people ask me do you miss it? And frankly,
up to last year, up to literally the day the pandemic hit. Literally, I remember that perfectly. I was a volunteer at our local high school, not high school, middle school. Thank you.
Sure.
Elementary, middle school. And I used to go because I'm bilingual, so I know Spanish, and they have a Spanish program in where we live. So I volunteered, and I was going there 3-4 times a week, just a couple hours. So that's just a lot of how much I miss it / how much I like little kids.
Yeah.
So the day the pandemic hit, we were freaked out, and then we didn't go back, of course, obviously. Yeah. So. And but I'm actually very, very happy. People who do know me know that I'm running my own business, and I'm doing my creative stuff and so many other projects. So he's going back. Yeah, he likes high school students like you, though. He likes high school. You always liked high school students.
I
find they're a little more easier to connect with. Where middle schoolers, man, it took me the first like 7 months to get any connection with them because I don't know, they're in their own world as a middle schooler.
They really are.
I mean, it depends on, because I worked at like 3 or 4 different schools. All of them were very, very different.
Sure.
I really like 5th graders because they, at least, once again in Spain, the level was decent enough. They could we could have casual conversations. They had a whole ton of energy, and they still kind of respected authority.
Yeah,
middle
that might
schoolers,
be the perfect age. You're right.
Middle school, it's like they're sweet for the first 6 months, and then they realize, I'm gonna start talking back and not doing shit.
Yeah.
Also, you're going to he talks about teaching in Spain. He hasn't taught here just yet.
Yeah, I've taught in Spain and South Korea, but not in the U.S.
So I feel like Spain.
That's true. You might have a different experience here.
Yeah, and I lived in Spain for many more years. Lived there for roughly about 16. So I know Spain very well. And I know Spanish kids very well, and I think they're different. But
yeah, especially when they're seniors, they will not move. Please do this work. Please, I want you to graduate. They won't move.
I'm begging you.
They just sit there.
They're like, okay.
I feel like a failure. Thank you.
But going back to 5th grade, that was kind of my favorite classes to volunteer when I was here. I loved my 5th graders.
I think, like you said, I think it's the perfect age.
Yeah, that is a good age.
Respect authority, energy.
Yeah.
And actually have thoughts.
Yeah, right.
Deep enough.
Not so afraid to say something in front of their peers, because I was teaching 8th grade, is nobody would say anything. They're afraid of every word that they could say.
Oh,
it's so sad. But you understand because you went through it, but you're like, oh God, okay. How do I? Oh God.
I don't miss it, but we need our teachers.
Don't miss it.
Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you, Dylan.
Get back in that classroom.
Exactly.
We need teachers.
It's quite funny because we're excited, of course, for the whole pandemic to be over, so he can go back into it, of course.
Of course.
But also, he's been writing much like you. He's been writing a whole bunch. He writes a lot of horror, much like you, of course, because that is the theme of our show. And so it's been good. It's been a good thing. In the hindsight, kind of look at the bright light kind of moment of life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just at least, kept writing.
So let's just kind of jump right in.
Do it.
Before we even get to your writing, which I am curious about, where did your love of horror come from? I mean, did you have that kind of eureka moment, or were you always just kind of around it?
I've been thinking about that all week, is where did this obsession with horror really stem from? And I think I channeled a lot of it from my parents. I grew up, my mom's favorite movie growing up was Alien. And I remember she had this big alien figurine that she would never let my brother and I touch. We could
oh my God, it's going to be future Dylan.
In a glass case, right? And she'd always say, this is going to be worth so much money. And who knows if that's, in her mind, that was worth so much money. But we always watched, I remember, the Jason, Friday the 13th, we watched Nightmare on Elm Street as a little kid, and it scared the shit out of me. But I'd always want to rent those movies when we went to the movie store. I'd always want to rent those lame Critters movies, Gremlins, right? So I think just being around it as a child. And then I remember I wanted to read a book that would scare me, because I got into reading in 5th grade. There we go, the perfect age range. We've just been talking about 5th grade. I really got into reading from my teacher. And I read what's the red fern one called? I'm blanking on that.
Where the Red Fern Grows?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I read that one, and I read Coraline and all these other kind of children books. And I thought I really kind of want to be scared. And that's kind of when I picked up my first King novel. So I guess it's been ingrained in my life the whole time. I'm a huge horror fan. I met my wife over 5 years ago, and she hated horror. She grew up in a family where horror was not the case. Very similar to you guys.
Yep.
Now she loves it. The other night, she's like, "Let's watch a horror movie," and I was the one that said, "I don't want to. I'm tired." So it's just funny to kind of see the roots of horror kind of spread out in my life. It's always been there. There's always been a creepy side to me.
That is hilarious, because I would definitely what's it called, like,
relate.
Thank you. I can definitely relate to your wife, because even my friends before we started the podcast, and she was like, but Ariadna, you don't like horror.
Right. How can this work?
We were best friends for a while, me and him, and we've always had a really good friendship. And throughout our friendship, he was like, okay, Ariadna, you say you don't like horror, but you do like Stranger Things. I'm like, okay, I don't think that's horror, but it could be. A lot of people don't like Stranger Things because it's scary. I'm like, oh, okay. And then little by little, here I am.
I mean,
how do you see me though? From like last year to this year?
Infuriating. Because there's some stuff that is like people view as horror, like The Others. You love that movie. You think that's just a wonderful movie, and it is. It is. I love The Others, but you were but people are like afraid of that movie.
Okay, so another thing that I think KPM is starting to realize as well, we do have a new segment called KPM Supernatural, and there we do talk about ghosts and witchy stuff, and of course supernatural stuff, and that's where I love. So I think The Others is it makes sense.
It falls in that category.
It does. It really does.
You like Sleepy Hollow?
Of course.
That's a pretty gory movie.
See, I don't know, but anyways.
So like I'll like try and introduce her to like a movie or a show, and she'll be like freaking out. I'm like, but you like Sleepy? You can watch.
I feel like this one.
What's
the difference?
I feel like I've been better since we started this whole journey of KPM.
Yeah, you have.
Without a doubt. Like I've read 2 King books. I've read 2 King books. Small ones, but still.
You read 1 King book in Richard Chismar.
Okay, fine, but I love Richard Chismar, so
true.
He's fine. He's good.
Wendy's Button Box.
Yes.
Mm-hmm, that's a good one.
So good.
Yeah, definitely for both, and we're so excited for the 3rd one to come out, as we already have all the sneak peeks. Question for you, or side note, I guess, going back to your love for literally King and Poe and Myers, like our name. Mm-hmm. When you told us about it, I just loved it so much. Like when you told us via email, we talked about it before we recorded and whatnot. It's so in tuned. So thank you so much for like telling us your story, of course, but also like profounding your love for these 3 things that Dylan clearly obviously loves.
Well, I don't think any of us would be here without those 3 icons. So thank you for coming out with such a delicious podcast, hitting all 3 topics that need to be hit upon, honestly.
They're so, as an outsider's point of view, because once again, horror is still kind of not my thing. They're so entwined with one another, and they help each other so much. And I realized that because I came up with the name because I know Dylan, obviously, and I'm like, this is you. The more guests we have on, the more people we talk to, sorry. It just makes more sense. Where did your love for Myers come as well?
That was one of the first horror movies that I remember not being afraid of the scenes so much as just music scaring the shit out of me. And I was fascinated with John Carpenter. I love that song so much, and it always, as a small child, fascinated me. How you can be so terrified of just a piano playing the same notes over and over again. I think that's where my initial love came from. But yeah, I love the Halloween series. My wife and I are currently zipping through them all because she, just like you, has never seen them all. So I'm sure you've seen them all by now.
Not me. We talked about it. We did a special on Halloween last year with our Sam. As always, she does the supernatural stuff with us this season, and the special holiday stuff with him. And they just talked a whole bunch. I mean, I was in the interview as well, and I asked them both a whole bunch of questions about Halloween. I've only watched I watched 2. I was like, I only watched 1. No, I watched 2.
Halloween 1 and Halloween 3.
Oh, and Halloween the 2018.
Yes, 2018. Well, she technically saw it. I mean, she was in the movie theater, but she was curled up in a ball.
That was way back when, though, like 2018.
I know that buzz.
Yeah, like that was the first time I ever watched a horror movie, and we were not dating. We were dating. Maybe we were dating. I guess
that's a big step.
So that was like a big thing.
And I said it on that episode, and I'll say it in this episode. I begged her not to come
because he loves me so much. He's like,
I'll go by myself. It's totally fine. I know where the place is. No, I'm going. All right. And yeah,
You warned her. It sounds like you gave her fair warning.
He did.
Fair warning, completely.
I wouldn't mind watching it again. I know we got excited that it's coming out this year. The Halloween Kills, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we plan on rewatching it too.
Exactly. So I feel like I'll probably be starting to watch them a little bit more, depending on which one. I did enjoy Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, but once again, I understand the whole thing. He explained me like Michael Myers on it and whatnot, but I think it's a very enjoyable movie. And yeah.
Yes.
Halloween.
Off the top of your head, do you have a favorite Poe story and or poem?
You know what? I always enjoyed, both as a student and then as a teacher, I always enjoyed the Cask of Amontillado.
Yes, underrated completely.
Yes, it's such a great one where he leads them underground to lock them and chain them up. I always appreciated that one. I remember in high school, I actually wrote a really, very creepy short story, kind of in the same vein, where it was with a brother leading his other brother into the backwoods and burying him alive, and kind of using the same quote of "for the love of God." That quote always stuck with me. So I wanted to write a short story surrounding that single phrase, "for the love of God." So yes, I love cool. Cask of Amontillado. I like teaching it. Fan of the Raven. I love all Poe, really. Yeah, what are your guys' favorite stuff?
I mean, it goes you laugh, but
because I know what's coming.
All of them probably, right?
Well, of course, but I actually have a tattoo on my back, and it's of the bust of Pallas of Athena with the raven sitting on top of it, and the raven, holding dominion over.
Oh, that's great.
Power and knowledge. So I've always loved the raven. Cask of Amontillado, I think, is not talked about nearly enough. Telltale Heart is wonderful, but I think that gets a little
that
too
one's
much.
Probably the most discussed.
It's good. It's really, really good, but
Definitely.
It's talked about a little too much. The Black Cat. I like the Golden Bug. I mean, just reading his stuff, sometimes it's just sad because he really just was a tortured human.
Yeah, he really was.
How did your if you remember, how did your students take Poe?
You know what? They really got hung up on his background as a man, with the incest and all that good stuff. So they got kind of hung up on that. I don't know. They enjoyed him.
Cousin or second cousin?
Yeah, his cousin. Yeah, he married his cousin, right? And they couldn't get over that.
And I lost him.
I mean, that's a good thing. It's like a red flag. It's like, now you know what not to do.
Well, but I remember they always liked reading Poe because he's so damn creepy, and you don't really get that in education.
True.
Yeah, that's something I'm gonna have to get used to is the American curriculum, because I haven't really looked at it since I was a student.
Right.
I never taught abroad, so Poe was always a breath of fresh air for me because I really can't handle frost. There's a lot of the mandatory literature I just fell asleep with. Like I would reread the Poe chapters and read those and just kind of ignore everything else.
I couldn't agree more.
You mentioned really quickly high school, but you did tell us offline, but now we can talk about it. Your sophomore year of high school paper as well.
Yes.
Because I definitely want to make sure that that story gets told because it's so cool.
Well, it's really just where my writing really began. I never saw myself as a writer until my sophomore year of high school. We had this silly personal narrative, what you get every year in high school. If you think back to your English class, write a story about your life. And I remember just writing one about my parents they'd just gotten remarried actually the year before to each other again. And it was a really special time in my life. So I said, okay, that seems like a good story to tell. And I remember sitting down in the computer lab and just saying, you know what, write it like a Stephen King story. You've read plenty of Stephen King books by now, so try to write it like him and not this boring, just tell, just like you get in high school. And that's really where my love for writing sparked. And all through high school, I began writing. I took all the creative writing classes that there were to offer. And actually, I entered a couple like local county short story contests during high school and placed in the top 3 in a couple of them. So that was really cool. And
Nice.
And then in college, I got my degree, my minor in creative writing, and I always continued writing short stories. And here I am today. I'm about 250 pages into my first novel. I have one short story published, and another is going to be on the way, and a lot of exciting things. But that's really when I think about when writing started. It was sophomore year, writing about my parents getting remarried.
And that's a beautiful place to start. That's why, and the fact that you wanted to write it like King himself is just very, I don't know, very touching. I saw that. I'm like, oh my God.
It is breathtaking that it wasn't like this creepy, bloody monster story that kind of swept me into the writing realm, I guess.
Oh, I get it. I totally get it. So you did just mention it, and we're definitely going to start talking about your short story, Slither. Can you tell us a little bit about it, please?
Definitely. For any viewers that haven't read the short story Slither yet, just a short little summation of it. It's a short story of a man named Jeffrey who's dying from a terminal illness. And so Jeffrey decides to pen a letter to his son, recounting one childhood summer in which he spent the season tending to his dying neighbor. His dying neighbor's name was Mr. Powers. And in that summer, something was growing inside of his neighbor. And that something kind of slithers into the rest of Jeffrey's life. And that's ultimately the story is the reason behind why Jeffrey's son can't come and visit him, because of this terminal sickness, this slithering beast that's growing within inside of them. So it's a very gruesome short story. Definitely a lot bloodier than my normal my normal pen story. It's a very homage to early Stephen King, right? When I read Slither, I think of 1980s cocaine, Stephen King, coked out of his mind, just writing these creature features with these massive monsters with 10 feet long teeth and blood bubbling on the wall. Like that's what I was going for when I was writing Slither, and I think I achieved that.
You did, without a doubt. I not that I've read many King, as I always say, and I have no shame of saying it. That's just I'm an avid reader, but just a whole different genre. And but I did read your story a few times. The first time when we of course met, but also right before this interview. And it definitely it gets into your skin.
What's funny is everything that I write gets passed through my number one fan, which is my wife. And so we finished reading the story and she said, yeah, that was great. It was so scary. But then she scrolled back to the kind of climactic scene where we see this beast unwrap itself in coils and coils. And we get our money's worth in this scene. I won't spoil anything, but she points to the scene and she goes, yeah, this is scary, but I really wish I could feel the pain this character is feeling. Like I want the teeth biting into my eyes as I read this. So I guess I happily oblige. So if you go out and read Slither and say, wow, this was gruesome, you have my wife, Mackenzie, to thank for that, because she kind of urged me to make it even bloodier.
That's well awesome. Achieved. Well achieved. This is also how I know that I'm definitely better in the horror genre, because between reading your story, I read Jeff's books.
Yep.
From not reading anything horror related, even Wendy's Button Box, it's not that it's horror related by any means, but it has a lot of nudges to hardcore reality. And I'm very honest about my past, and through this podcast and many other podcasts and other stuff. So if you know me, you know what went on. So reading those kind of stories kind of, did trigger me at some point of life. But from going from there to here, reading his story, I'm like, okay, good. So I do see the progress with it myself, which is always good. And your story, what captivated me, not only how when you explained it, of course, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. Before I ask you the main question about the story, what made you write it, first of all?
What made me initially write it is, and I hate to sound like a sellout, but I guess we're always trying to sell what we write, is actually I was working on the novel that I'm working on now. I was literally in the infancy stages, just charting out what this novel could eventually become. And I received a text from one of my English teacher friends, and it was a picture for a podcast that they listened to. And it said, hey, calling all fiction writers, we have a brand new segment called Full Body Chills coming out in October. It's the second season. We are looking for any campfire stories. And immediately when I read that, campfire stories, I don't know how anybody else interprets that, but when I think of campfire stories as a young child, I always wanted, these werewolves coming out of the woods and tearing through skin and tearing and biting teeth and blood. And that's the kind of campfire story that I always thought of, not this rusty hook left on a door handle BS that you get around.
Oh my God, that's the most generic one.
Right, and that's what you always hear.
You hit it.
That's what you always hear. So yeah, well, I wrote this story with the onset of I want to try to sell this to this specific podcast group because I think I can write a pretty creepy campfire story because I've been doing this kind of my whole life. And so yeah, as I wrote it, I would just picture myself sitting outside on the moon and the sound of wood crackling, and I just kind of penned this dark story. It took me literally 3 days. And normally a story, it goes through edits, it gets put through the meat pulper, and this one came pretty easily. I knew what I wanted from the onset of it.
That is definitely the feel you get to it without a doubt when you read it, the campfire one.
Thank you.
You reminded me. I thought you were gonna go to like, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Of course, that kind of. But I guess exactly. the newer You're Afraid of the Dark.
Vein. Yes, I'm a Goosebumps baby. I'm a Are You Afraid in the Dark junkie.
Exactly. That's a lot in our realm, especially with Dylan, of course. All right. So of course, the next one's a little bit more going into depth about the story, of course, because you do talk about undiagnosed mental health issues, and of course, its part in the household.
Sure.
I don't even know where to begin to continue asking you more about the topic, but what is your take on it, and like why did you want to bring this to life? Perspective.
When I wrote this story, honestly, halfway through it, I kind of felt that this story was this creature feature, lots of blood, lots of gore, but there's more to a story than just that. And I kind of felt myself writing about kind of the nasty sides of cancer, almost of this lingering generational disease that we don't want to see the final result of what could happen to it. And so I don't know, I kind of found myself writing about cancer, but as an English major, as English teachers, I guess we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the famous essay, Death of the Author, right? Where as soon as the author pens their story, you shouldn't ask them anything about it because they don't know anything about it, because they can never recreate that. They can never recapture that exact thread line their thoughts were weaving that day. So I think it's about cancer. You could think it's about something totally different, and you might be right. Who knows? So I think it's about cancer, but your interpretation is just as valid.
And that's one of the reasons why I love that story so much, because of that, because it could literally be anything that the reader wants to place there. And because once again, we, family trauma and all these sorts of things growing up and whatnot, you can easily place the word cancer with something completely different, as like bipolar, as something completely, and I don't know, that's something that really, really
and undiagnosed, sickness that carries from
and like that goes from generation to generation, depression or anxiety, and then like I'm all about breaking generational traumas. So I'm all about self-growth. If you met me through my other two podcasts, through my other businesses in general, that has nothing to do with horror itself, that's where I come from. And hence why your story and the way that you explained it, I was like, oh, okay, this is actually a story that I can, it's gory and it's really different for me, of course, but at the same time there's an underlining tone to it, and I really wanted to make sure to point that out, basically.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, I appreciate the time to talk about the story in great depths.
That's what you get with me, basically.
I really like what you just said. I found it very refreshing, especially coming from a creator, that the reader can interpret the story how they like. That's so rare, I find. To go on a very quick side tangent, that's not horror, but it's sci-fi. I'm a diehard Star Wars fan, and not just the movies, but I love the books, cartoon. Like I that is for me the greatest story ever told.
Of course.
Problem is George Lucas. The man just fights with the fans, and though he doesn't have control anymore, the fans and him still have that constant bickering. And he's like, no, none of you understand what Star Wars is. I do. Like, George, people are like, view your incredible story as maybe something different or something else. And he'll just say, no, you're all wrong. And just thank you for allowing people to interpret your story, because it's just, I hate when it's the creator says, no, it's this way, and you're all stupid and wrong.
Well, stories are communal, right?
Yes.
They're shared amongst us. So they're not singular. We don't each, get to take one story and that's the way it is. There's something that we share, and they're ageless, they're timeless. So yeah,
completely agree. Something as big as Star Wars or Harry Potter, probably, or something like that, to something as
we all have simple. A piece of shaping it.
Yeah, exactly. Like it all. Have you ever read a book or a story that you read like when you were probably 15 and then when you were 25, and it's a whole different kind of outlook?
Of course.
That's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you just have a different perspective. It's like us reading Harry Potter now. I'm assuming it would probably be different to some extent.
I'm kind of afraid to read Harry Potter right now because I have a coworker who never read it, and I think he's like 10, 15 years older than me, but he's reading through it now, and he never grew up with Harry like we all did. So he's kind of looking at it from a very different
like
perspective.
He's the neighbor in the backyard. Hey.
Yeah.
So he didn't have the magic of being a kid and growing up with it. So he's kind of looking at it like, look at all these plot holes and why didn't they do this? I'm like, oh, you're missing
that childhood flair of that possibility you felt as a child. Yeah, it's gone. That makes sense. My wife can't get in it. She same thing. I've just said, you know what, it's a good story if you can get past kind of the childhood fantasy of it, but you can't.
Which it makes so much sense. I mean, for me, it's so super important to keep the magic alive in general, not only Harry Potter, but just literally in general. I'm a huge Disney fan. It's that kind of essence of that childlike nature, because that's what we all need in life. So yeah, I definitely understand where both are coming from. What I also wanted to ask you was, going back really quickly again to your story once more, actually, is, did writing the story change your perspective on how to deal with mental health issues?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess I never looked at the story outside of the realm of what it could be. You know what? I think about death every day. And I guess in a way, Slither was just one avenue for my mind to explore the bloody possibility of our ends. So I guess it did help in a way to prepare for the worst. I certainly hope that doesn't happen.
No, of course not. But I feel like, you always gotta take the best for what it is, and it like take advantage of the moments and be present and things like that. That's where I had my take, or that was my take, I guess, on it. Well, we know that English, of course, helped you. Teaching English, helped you your journey into creative writing, of course. I'm sure it made a really big impact. Any other side stories that you want to tell us about the transition from teaching English to creative writing full time?
English has been so foundational in my life. I'm just trying to think of the ways that it's kind of. We'll have to come back to that one. I'm not too sure on that one.
If you can remember, did you ever have a student that wrote something creative in horror-wise? Did you ever do an assignment like that?
No, honestly, not many students wrote horror. I was not lucky enough to teach many creative writing courses. So the students that I got, the assignments that I normally got stuck with was more nonfiction and real life based. So unfortunately, especially in the American curriculum, there's not a lot of time for the creative flair that fiction writing demands. So Unfortunately, I never witnessed too many horror stories as a teacher. I mostly got your boring personal narratives about getting your driver's license or whatever. But
just the way you said that, we felt you, or whatever. Sure.
You can tell I miss the field of teaching. You can tell in my voice.
You do sound like me, though. Anytime I talk about teaching, I'm like, no.
So no, I can't recount any great horror of my past students, but I'm sure they lived there. Like I said, it's not their fault so much as the system has failed them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Creativity isn't a commodity that our country values highly.
Oh, that makes me sad.
Oh, freaking great.
And with that.
Sorry for bringing us down here.
No, but it's true though. Like, it's true. And before I ask you the next question, because I really want to talk about this one actually. That's something this is what I always say. This is what we do. This is why we created King Poe Myers. Definitely. Like, we want to make sure that we bring people like you on board and be like, yo, like, even if he's just starting, even if you have 100 books out, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, we're here just to enjoy, well, horror, obviously, but just that creative side of exploring worlds and fantasies, and then some.
There's so much joy in building.
I'm
I agree. That's that every day that we can just build, construct. It's a blessing.
It really, really is. I mean, as content creators, like we always say, and as writers ourselves, it's so much fun. It's so nice to get involved into that, and then just have like that feedback from people, and like knowing that, oh, like it's gonna touch, even if it's just one person, but there you go. Like,
it makes everything worthwhile. Yeah,
it really, really does. I want to ask you about your quote, because I really enjoyed your quote. And your quote was, you told yourself, well, you know the quote I'm talking about, so you can tell the story if you like.
Definitely. It's honestly, every time, especially as a young writer, I had this imposter syndrome when I would sit down and say, well, I don't know how to write. I've never done this. I don't have formal
all
training
been there.
Yet, right? Yes. And no matter what you do, I feel like the first, not few times, first hundreds, for thousands times you sit down to do something, you have imposter syndrome. I shouldn't be here. I'm not qualified to be here. So I guess one mantra that has kind of always been in my life is just do what Stephen King does. You've read literally everything he's ever written. You know how he writes. Just write like he does. And through that mantra, just like any writer, you kind of find your own voice through the voices of others. And that's why, reading is so important, right? So you can discover the voices that work for you, that speak loudest to you, that you can see yourself in and implement in your own writing, and the voices that don't work, the voices that seem inauthentic and that you say, oh, I don't like this book, I'm going to close it. You take stock of why you closed that book, and you learn from that voice just as much as the voice that guides you on. So
I love that you mentioned that, because I'll have so many people come up to me, because I'm an avid reader. I always have been. I love it. And people, ask me for recommendations, and they tell me, it's like, oh, I started this book and I have to finish it even if I don't like it. I'm like, why are you, torturing yourself?
The minute I lose that feel, I'm like, done.
Yeah.
I'm not going to torture myself.
No, I feel like my rule of thumb is I give a book about 75 pages. If it's not singing to me after 75, we're not meant to get married, and that's okay.
Love that. But it's true though.
But I feel like that's kind of normal now. I mean, I think I've talked about this before, but I've had people tell me, like, you got to read this series. The first 3 books are going to suck, but book 4, I'm like,
yeah. And if that's the case, it's really not that good.
No, I'm like, yeah, it could be a cool reveal, but I'm not going to.
Yeah. Plod through this.
Yeah.
And, maybe your perspective is like, you like something different than the rest of the viewers, even if it's like a highly, like, what's it called? Well-known novel or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's like, you like what you like, and you want to read what you want to read. And that's why I love what you said. Like, I love that you, like, with this quote and this mantra itself, and I love that word as well. It guides you to know what you want to write and read, but also what you don't like. And that's super important as a person overall, but definitely as a writer and as a content creator.
There's too much out there to get bogged down on something that doesn't bring you joy.
And same goes for like TV shows. We did have this conversation, maybe not on air precisely, but and I can't recall any TV show right now, but we got the same thing. Oh, you really have to watch the show. The first 3 seasons are, but then season 4, you're like, nah, I have better things to do with my time. Thank you very much.
I couldn't agree more. And
yeah, definitely. So we talked a little bit about your teenagehood, of course, and things like that, but we also want to know about your influences. So going back to your childhood, what was one of your favorite childhood books?
Oh man, so I really got into kind of the teenage young adult horror series, Cirque du Freak by Darren Chan, which it tells a story of a teenager who becomes a vampire, and he works in a freak show. So that definitely influenced me to get into King and then to get into horror writing. So I love that series as a child. I mentioned before Where the Red Fern Grows was like the first book that spoke to me, and I said, whoa, this is what stories can do for your life. I always grew up with dogs, so I think that one, just being centered around animals, that's why it spoke to me so much as it did.
And what about now? I know that like Dylan has questions when it comes to King stuff. So like favorite King books and all that stuff.
I hate the question, but I have to ask. I mean, do you have like a pantheon of your King books?
Oh, of course.
So what are they?
It's funny. Our top shelf of our library, we display like our favorite books, and
that's a good idea.
Yeah, and that's where many of the King ones are. My first one I ever read was It, so that's certainly my favorite King novel. I've read that one probably a dozen times over my lifetime. I love It. There's just so much to that story to unpack. I see why it's 1,100 pages. So I love It. That's a very widely loved one. One that's kind of under the table that I think doesn't get enough recognition, but it really is a beautiful tale, is both Doohickey, because that's about the act of creation. That's the act of being an artist. And I think maybe that speaks to me and probably you, Dylan, because we're artists ourselves, so we can see ourselves through that character.
Is that a scary one?
I have not read Doohickey. That's part of my summer. That's part of my summer lineup. I can't wait to read Doohickey.
That's a great summer book. Yeah, that's a great summer book, and it's kind of like it's got a little supernatural ghost story whittled in there. That's a great. I know you'll like that one. So I like that one, and also From a Buick 8, I think, is another underrated novel that doesn't get a lot of recognition, but I think is a beautiful story.
I love hearing people's top books, because I haven't heard anyone talk about From a Buick 8. And I like how
you never hear that one mentioned.
That's so interesting. So the story was powerful to you, you said? Or
yeah, and it's funny because I went into it. I was a high schooler. I was a senior. And if you've read From a Buick 8, it's told from the viewpoint of a police officer. So here I am in high school, fuck the police. That was my viewpoint, because I'm this, rebel teenager. I'm completely against the police force. So I think, oh, cops, this is going to be the worst novel. But just the way it's written about just kind of how human connection, he has this beautiful metaphor of how our connections are like these links in a chain, and how when one person dies, kind of the chain can kind of break. And it's just this beautiful metaphor I remember in the first 30 pages, and it just kind of hooked me. And that's writing, really. If you can have one hook within your story grasp, I think you're doing something right there. So I really like From a Buick 8. It's very cute, creature heavy. If you read the Dark Tower series, it's a great, it explores that world so much more. And I think that's also why I love From a Buick 8, because it
Joshua, don't tell me this right now.
You just finished Wolves of the Kala, did you not? I
did. Do not laugh at me, woman.
Is this your first trip to the tower?
This is my first trip to the tower, and Aries laughs at my pain.
I'm sorry, not sorry.
You have pain coming up, my friend.
I'm very, very excited, but I stopped reading like 6 and I'm not going to read 6 and 7 for a while, because I found an awesome non-spoiler page, and this person wrote down, listed every single book and
how they connect,
how it connects.
Sure.
And I don't think from a Buick Gate was on there. So I have like Desperation, The Regulators, just all of the ones I haven't got yet. And I think I have like 10 books, including 6 and 7 to go.
Sure.
And now I have 11.
So honestly, it's not necessary for you to read that book to understand the Dark Tower series. It just uses the idea of portals and demonstrates what could be behind one of these doors in that Todash space that he writes about. So it's a fascinating book. I guess you wouldn't need to read the Dark Tower to understand it at all, but it's exciting that you're on your trip to the tower. Are you not enjoying it as much as you thought you would?
Oh, no. I am really enjoying it. It's just, I have a backlog of maybe 100 books and I'm trying to fit everything in. So yeah, right now it's Desperation, then The Regulators, Talisman, Black House, because I really want, when I finally get to book 7, I know everything kind of happens. So I want to be as well prepared as possible.
Sure, makes sense.
Have
you read what's the one with not Everything's Eventual. Dang it, it's gonna come back to me. It's got 4 novellas about Vietnam in it.
Well, Vietnam.
Hearts in Atlantis. That's what I'm thinking.
That's also up there.
I was gonna say that one, and you definitely want to make sure you read that one before you read book 7.
All 4 novellas, or can I just read the first one, like what, the Low Men in Yellow Coats or something?
I think that's the 3rd or 4th one. Yeah, you could probably just get away with that one. They all are connected because that's what Stephen King does. He connects all of his stories, but you could probably just get away with Low Men in Yellow Coats.
Okay. Obviously, spoiler free, but I find it so interesting about Dark Tower that the people I've talked to are in 2 different camps, and there's a no man's land in between them. Sure. You love the ending or you hate the ending. Do you feel like you're in that no man's land? Ends? No, it's not been spoiled. I just know it. I mean, I just finished book 5. So he says something very big at the end of book 5, and I'm like, wait, what?
Sure.
So what was your take on the ending?
Well, unfortunately, when I first read the books, I was really big into forum searching online. I was big into all the Stephen King forums I could get my hands on. So I had the ending spoiled, which kind of sucked. But looking back on it, it was probably a good thing. So I can kind of mentally prepare myself. I initially hated it, and I found myself in the hate camp for a couple years. Rereading the series a few more times, I can understand its literary purpose, and I can understand why King did what he did. It's not the way I would end the series, but again, everyone's interpretation can be different, and that's the beauty of it. So I didn't personally love the ending, but I love the Dark Tower series. I tell anybody.
Love the journey as well.
I love the journey. It's when you're done with the novel, with the series, you can read just about any book by Stephen King, and you can see a reference from the Dark Tower. And so that series is at the center of Stephen King's work. So that's why I've read it so many times, because then you get that joy of literally almost every book has some kind of little reference. Even It has one reference where one chapter opens up, everything was following the path of the beam. And you're like, oh, I know exactly what that means. So it's just cool things like, I'm a nerd. I'm a book nerd. So I love those. I love those little lines that mean nothing, but it's like, I know I have the world in my hand with that one line. And it's like King wrote that for me. So yeah, I love the Dark Tower series. Best of luck finishing that journey whenever you get there. I hope you love it, but you'll probably hate the ending.
I think by June I'll be there.
I would think so. I know we have the only pit stop you have in between is the book later.
Yes, but once again,
that's a week.
Yeah, that's a quick book.
That's a quick book, basically. But other than that, I think by June, so by the end of our season, essentially speaking, we'll see where you're at.
And then you'll have to do an episode dedicated to the ending.
An episode or 2 or 3 or a whole month again. Because we're all been waiting for it.
I think we're gonna have to do something special for the end of Dark Tower.
Definitely. You
We've-
definitely have
our
to. It's
KPM
literally
fam-
at the center of King's work.
Yeah. And our KPFM has been following
We
you
may
through
have
since
to-
season 1.
We may have to bring Joshua back.
Oh, we're definitely bringing
Yeah,
Joshua
I would
back.
love
We
to.
are bringing you back.
We may have to have like a little powwow and Dylan
Whoa.
just trying to handle it, because I don't know what happens. I think I just had one of my friends
You're so cute.
I think it was at the end of Wizards and Glass, told me like, you need to stop what you're doing and read The Stand, because I hadn't read The Stand yet. And like, you need The Stand. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I know that's a big one because of Randy, who I think is.
I don't love The Stand, so it's like, yeah, I guess that one would be helpful, but really, just know The Stand's about a super flu. All right, there you go.
And
no, but you do need to know it for Randall Flagg, I guess.
King's greatest villain.
He is. Yeah, he is. You'll see what happens to his greatest villain in this series.
Dun, dun, dun.
Right. I would love to be back for that discussion. You inspired me. I'm gonna restart the series actually tonight.
Boom.
I was just looking for a new book to start, so I'll just restart with Gunslinger.
I'm loving this because we did talk about it really briefly in our first episode, our introduction episode, that we do have KPM King Month back right now in March, actually, so it's coming up soon. So we're gonna keep talking about King stuff, him and our beautiful guests. And we'll definitely find a way to have you back as well and have this discussion, because I feel like whenever that happens, all of you guys are just gonna come together and be like, let's talk about this, let's talk about that.
All right, I'm sorry it's not on the itinerary, but I have to ask because it may change for you. Right now, how would you rank the Dark Tower books? Just 1 through 7, not all the extra gravy.
I like the extra gravy too. Let's see. My favorite is probably the second one, Drawing of the Three. I think that one's just a fascinating tale.
We talked about that one with Tony.
I believe so.
Yeah, with KPM King Month for season 1. Tony,
that was action-packed fun.
Yes.
Yeah, very action-packed. Introduces the Doors, which is at the crux of his universe. He uses that for the Buick 8, what I was referencing. That's the crux of that story. So I that's number 1 for me. I guess my second favorite, when I first read the series, it was Wizard and Glass, but now every time reading it since the Wizard and Glass is solely a backstory novel, I find that one is the most tedious. So I guess I would rank that one worst, simply because it's backstory that I already know. And so I know there's nothing that can really change within this narrative for me. So I don't know. It's a beautiful backstory. It's a beautiful romance story, which you don't really get a lot of from King. So I can appreciate that from him. But yeah, after the first read through, I guess that one would be my last. So what's my second favorite? Because that's really the most important. I guess the last one would be my second favorite. It's heart-wrenching. The last one sucks to read. You just want to get that one like pulling a Band-Aid, get it over with.
I'm so excited to continue my journey to the Dark Tower, Joshua. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And it's going to be hard not to read them in succession, books 6 and 7, because book 6 is totally just a setup novel. It's not even a standalone book. It's a setup book. So
I mean, I picked it up and it was wicked small compared
to the other ones. Yeah, it's a setup book to get you ready for book 7. So
all right. All right.
On that sour note.
It's like just get ready. Just get ready. It's all good. It's all good. I don't even know where to continue right now. Oh, well, I guess
leaving the Dark Tower for a moment.
Just for a moment, because we love talking about King, of course. I really wanted to ask you this question because you are an English teacher, because you did have a minor in creative writing.
Sure. In
your opinion, what are the most important elements of good writing?
Oh, that's a great question. What makes something a good piece of writing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first, I think for me, I can only speak personally for me. The most important thing for my writing is language. I want to be fresh. I want to be original, because one of the biggest hurdles that, as I talked about earlier, was this idea of imposter syndrome, that how could I possibly write anything different or unique that already hasn't been said? And for the longest time, that was kind of the biggest hurdle for me to get over, is everything's been said in the year 2020. How can I say anything differently when writing has been going on for hundreds, thousands of years? I have nothing new to bring to the table. I have no new story. And that's my own hurdle, that just trying to find ways to describe something in an original feed, that I think makes good writing, because ultimately everything has been said before. Every story for the most part has been told. So now it's up to us as a writer to tell it in a unique, different way. And I guess so at the heart of good writing, I guess it's focusing on the language. It's focusing on the images that you can create, and the metaphors that you can connect life to. So at the heart of writing, that's it for me. And when I was a teacher, we would work on assignment after assignment of just writing out a cliche. She smelled like roses, and then writing something original off of that, right? Because our world is such cliche nonsense that we need to come up with original things to say. And I think that at the heart is good writing. How do we look at something that we see a million times a day, and how do we describe it in a new light? So that's good writing for me in my standards. So I certainly find myself sometimes going overboard, a little bit of purple prose, got to pull back the adjectives and describing words here, and just focus on the story. Because that's another question, right? What comes first, the story or the plot or the characters, the chicken or the egg? And I guess they work hand in hand. They work in tandem, really. If you're focused on the language, and if you're focused on the minute details that make up a conversation, that make up a scene, you'll capture what your readers want to see. And that's really the job of the writer, is to view their landscape, pick out the small details that make up the portrait, and try to express it back to the reader. So that's really how I view it. I love Alice in Wonderland. It's huge. The novel, of course, not the Disney crap. It's a huge influence. And so I always, when I'm writing and I'm kind of in that flow, right, when you're mesmerized, I picture myself as Alice, like looking through the looking glass and just describing what it is I'm seeing, and trying to report back, the rest of society of what this magical land could be and is, if they took the time to look at it. So I think good writing is slowing down to look at the fine details, and to look at how life breathes around us. So I don't know if any of that makes sense. There, me with my purple prose. So but that's good writing to me. It's just clear, decisive images that makes us view something in a different way.
I think it made perfect sense. I completely agree with you when it comes to imposter syndrome. I feel like that's something that we all feel, no matter what area of expertise you're working in or at. I've had clients before that was their biggest struggle. Even with me, that's sometimes my biggest struggle, because I'm like, what am I doing in this room? Like, I'm like talking to so-and-so person. And I'm like, wait,
we get in our own way.
You really do. You really, really do. And it's an everyday battle of like, or I don't even want to call it battle, but like it's an everyday constant effort of saying, you know what, I am worthy. Like I know what I'm talking about, and like I'm gonna share my story because it's my point of view is different than anybody else's. And once again, that in itself probably does sound like a cliche, but at the end of the day, that's how we're here.
Right. That's what we do.
There's a million podcasts, or I don't know if podcasts, actually not a million precisely just yet about horror, but there's quite a few about them. Or about King, of course, or things like that. I'm like, well, this is our dating point of view. Dylan hasn't read The Dark Tower, and he's going through The Dark Tower, and then he talks to you. He talks to Tony and Mel and Sandra and Beth and Dave, and hopefully I Jesse, there we go, all of them from all the King fans that we've had in season 1, season 2. And our voice, I think, is just expressing. So I definitely
exactly.
Completely
well, thank you.
agree.
I appreciate it.
Definitely, of course. What advice do you have for writers, Mr. Joshua?
The greatest advice I can give any writers is the same that Stephen King gives. It's read a lot and write a lot. If you want to be a writer, you have to read every day, and you have to write every day. It's so simple. It's almost a crime. That would be my advice. Write what you love and read what you love. You don't have to pick up a dictionary because I have terrible vocabulary. No, just read a book that get your blood pumping, right? Write what you like. It doesn't have to be fiction. It doesn't have to be romance. It doesn't have to be horror. It can be, what you did that morning. You could journal, but if you want to be a writer, I guess every day you have to write and you have to read. So that's how I model my life. That's kind of my Stephen King is at the top of the mantle, right? And that's what he set in his novels. So that's what I do the same.
All right. Before we wrap up, of course, because I feel like with conversations like these, we can just go on for hours and hours.
Easily.
Definitely. You're right. Promotion time, of course, because you already mentioned a little bit about your novel. Can you tell us more about your novel? When is it? When do you think it's coming out? How is that process going? Like, tell us all about it.
I would love to. Thank you for asking.
Of
so
course.
I am in the process of writing my first novel. It's been a process, and that's to be sure. I started it in June, and then I worked up to it until August, and I went back to teaching for 3 months, and then that's when I had my retirement. So December 1st, I sat back down to read my novel, and I said, these 180 pages, they're good, but I want to restart over. So in the past 2 months, I've written 250 brand fresh new pages for it. I would say there's probably 100 pages left. I'm looking to finish it up in the next month here. Right now, I have a working title. It's shifted a little bit from what we originally talked about. But right now, the working title of the novel is Sleep Tight, Don't Let the Death Bugs Bite. And it tells the story about the Nowak family, Debbie and her son Roland, and they moved back to small town Wisconsin. Debbie lived there as a young girl, and she was forced from the town, and she can't remember what evil force has forced her from this town, but she will soon come to remember what exactly made her flee from the small town of Kagan all those years ago. So Sleep Tight, Don't Let the Bed Bugs Bite is another creature feature, but that really examines kind of the lessons that we learn both growing up and as we're in our impressionable ages, and how those lessons kind of decide the rest of our actions throughout life, and how sometimes, even against our best wishes, we sometimes act against ourselves for reasons that we really don't understand, that are kind of planted within our subconscious. So that's really what the Sleep Tight, Don't Let the Death Bugs Bite is really kind of pulling at. Right now, I do not have a publisher. That is my process that I'm currently in. I am working almost every day. I send out at least a couple emails to different publishing companies and houses, and even novel contests that I found online, just try to get my story out there, try to get an editor or anybody to kind of sniff out my debut novel and pick me up as a first-time author here. So I'm excited for the journey. Like I said, I'm almost done with my first draft here, and I'm hoping that by the end of 2021 that I can be signed on with a publishing house.
For sure. We're very excited to read it, without a doubt.
Thank you.
I feel like I've already, because once again, we already read your short story, of course, and if this is a little bit, I feel like it's a different take on what it is, and reading and listening to your words, it has a lot of my kind of mythology, except you add the horror into it that I don't. Yes. But regardless, I know the basis of that, and I really, really am intrigued and want to know more. I'm definitely gonna we're both gonna be like, okay, Joshua, the moment that you have the date, let us know.
Thank you, and stay posted. If you're looking to follow me, you can find me on Instagram. My handle is my name, Joshua Bates Author, and I will be posting all of my updates on my Instagram handle, and I'm currently in the process of making my own website. So there's a lot of fun things to do when you're a solo writer.
Exactly. Nice. No, there is. I resonate with that so much. So much. Once again, we could be talking for hours without a doubt, as entrepreneurs that we are.
Mm-hmm. The work is never done.
Oof. You can say that again. This is what I was telling you before. Of course, Dylan works, and right now he's in a whole different path, getting ready for, teaching again, all sorts of things like that. But my work schedule, it could be at 10 o'clock at night for a meeting, for something or other. Yeah, you got to set up, you got to, so I get it. And quite a few are followers as well. They reached out to me I understand you, Eddie.
I'm right there with you.
Yes. Before we wrap up completely, any King questions? Anything that I know that Dylan might be
Biggest disappointment?
Ooh.
Ooh, that's a great question.
The ending
Well,
of Dark Tower.
The Stand is definitely on that list just because so many, I know so many King fans love The Stand. So to me, it should be a top 10 novel, and it wouldn't crack my top 10 list of favorite King novels. So I'd say that's definitely on the list. Have you ever read Sleeping Beauties that came out?
I have not.
5 years. Yeah, don't even bother picking it up. You can probably find it at Goodwill for $1, but you can save that $1 for something else. That one was a huge. I just get really excited when a new King book comes out, and that one of recent memory really let me down. But I guess one unpopular take, because I haven't really seen much of this, is I really dislike the Mercedes trilogy. I know.
Really?
I know you're into it. Did you like it?
I read the first 2 books. I'm taking a break from the third one, but I loved the first 2 books.
And maybe I just don't like the crime series. And he's certainly been in a crime phase the past 6-7 years. I don't know. I'm tired out of the crime scene.
It could be that then. Because you like what did I get you? I'll get you a bunch of stuff for Christmas. I know. Agatha Christie. Yeah, we got each other tons of books, which is amazing.
But she's not true crime. She's just classic mystery.
Oh, okay, sorry. So it could be that. And then
definitely.
I guess with King, well, you said it though. What's the number 1 book that you would recommend?
For a new King fan starting out, especially if you're like, I really don't like the creepy, the monsters, I would recommend, and this is what my wife and I first read because she hadn't read King either. So the first book that we read together was 11/22/63. I highly recommend that one. Dylan, have you read that one?
No, God for Christmas on the list.
Oh, it's such a good story. I personally am not like a huge history buff, and that one's immersed in history, but it's still just a terrific read. So fast paced, highly engaging. There's a little romance to it, which again, there's not a lot of romance in King novels, so I do appreciate whenever he throws in a little love interest. But yeah, that one's a fascinating tale. It's really fast paced, like I said, and if you've never gotten into King before, I highly recommend 11/22/63. I think that one.
I definitely got my own set of books to read. Once again, a whole different genre, by all means. But I'll keep in mind Duma-Key, and I'll keep in mind 11/22/63, which I did get him for Christmas.
That's a great gift. You did well.
Oh, thank you. And he got plenty. He got plenty. We should do a book haul, like picture some sort of life.
Yes, we should.
The last 3 questions we ask every single one. It's pretty easy. I don't know how much you love Halloween though, but we do.
It's my favorite holiday.
We didn't really touch on Halloween, even though we were
talking
for a while. There you go. I
Perfect
had a
answer.
hunch. What's the first question?
Favorite Halloween candy?
Oh, that's a great question. My wife and I are such sweet eaters too. I guess my favorite Halloween candy, it's got to be king size, right? It's obviously king size. So I guess if I had to get a king size bar, I'm looking for a Kit Kat. I'm going Kit Kat.
That's like one of my favorites.
It's so hard though, because if you gave me Skittles, I'm like, okay, I'm good with that. Or Twix, okay, I'm good with that. I'm not choosy. So give me anything.
Our second to last question is describe Halloween in 3 words.
Oh, wow. Halloween in 3 words. I just keep going to Michael Myers, something with Michael Myers killing. Michael Myers kills. That's what I think. When I think of Halloween, I just think of that meme that's taken from Halloween, the first Halloween movie of Michael just poking from behind the bush. Yep. That's what I think of when I think of Halloween. I just think of Michael behind the bush. Like, all right, it's Halloween season, baby. So that's what I think. Michael Myers hiding, I guess, which doesn't make sense really, but that's when I think of Halloween, that's the picture that conjures up in my mind.
That comes up. We definitely have to talk about Halloween in a whole different episode or moment of time, of course. And our last one, even though you already said it, we'll definitely link it down below. Once more, where can we find you, please?
So follow me on Instagram. You can find me at Joshua Bates Author. So it's joshua.bates.author. And you can find I have little blurbs from my upcoming novel, Sleep Tight, Don't Let the Death Bugs Bite. I have where you can find the link to Slither, which is at fullbodieschillspodcast.com. But you can find that link on my Instagram page, again, at Joshua Bates Author. So go check it out if you haven't read the short story Slither yet. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, please do. Definitely for all our KPM fan who loves horror as much as Dylan does. Can't say the same for myself again.
Thanks for having me tonight. It was a blast talking King and Myers and Poe and my writing process with you guys. I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate that. It's nice to step away from the writing to talk about it for a little bit. I don't get a chance to do that often, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on.
Definitely. I once again, as an entrepreneur to another entrepreneur, it's a lonely path sometimes, so it's also really nice to have these breaks. It really is. And just have that community out there that really gets it. Yeah, as for us, stay tuned, of course, as always, next week, and Tuesdays, because we have every other Tuesday. KPM,
one of the Sams.
One of the Sams, exactly. Either Sam from Sam So Spooky or Sammy from Flipping Tables. So in other words, either true crime or supernatural stuff. Other than that, we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much. Bye.
See you guys.